What if most of what you were taught about history is not 100% accurate? What if what you were told at childhood via books, teachers, cartoons, movies, or even your parents were lies? Would it matter? Would you want to know the truth? Knowing why historical narratives were altered can shed light on the intentions of those allowing us to critically assess the impact on society and history. It's essential to seek accuracy in historical knowledge. It's also natural for information to evolve and change over time. While the search for the first civilization or people is a fascinating journey, the ambiguity of early history leaves room for speculation and sometimes even manipulation. While some went as far as to lie, forge findings, plant artifacts at dig sites, or just plain old make a complete mess of things. Deliberately creating fake historical narratives to portray one group as superior. In 1748, Charles attempted to make ancient Rome real with his fake document called the Description of Britain. It was a fictional map with descriptions of people and places in ancient Rome and Britain alleged to contain detailed accounts from a Roman general. The forgery was created by Charles Bertram, who claims he found a manuscript from a 14th-century English monk. Bertram copied a document and added people and places on this map and said a monk in the 1300s created it. Charles had fabricated a whole town, villages along with a highly decorated Roman general and an English monk as a pseudonym. His motives were to actualize Rome, as was done with Homer for Troy and Greece. To make matters worse, this fake document was considered the premier source of information on the Roman Britain era from more than 100 years after it was made available in 1749. So from 1749, every theorist's suppositions, learning, institutions and publications of history for Rome use this fake document as its premier source of information and sometimes the only source, so no fact-checking for well over 100 years. Scholars used this to establish Rome and further to create an ancient place that actually never existed. In 1898, William Donnelly, during an early morning walk along the shore, discovered Dumbuck Cranag's site, which is located on the banks of the Clyde River in Scotland. The excavation was fruitful after finding 27 ancient stumps placed a couple feet apart. A dug-out canoe, pile of bones and several pieces no one has seen before, dating back to the 2nd BC. The reputation that he built in assisting in excavating and illustrating the sites in Sheep Hill and Dunboy earning a reputation for Donnelly to be an enthusiastic and trusted archaeologist. Donnelly gained both financial and emotional support from the Helens Big Naturalist and Antiquarian Society. Since 1899, a prominent archaeologist named Robert Monroe, he adamantly promoted that the Dumbuck artifacts were elaborate forgeries placed by a team of well-educated artists and conmen. Archaeologists began to question the validity and accused him of creating and staging them on the river. What Donnelly got caught doing was attempting to create an ancient group of people. He could say these were the Atlanteans or they were the first Scottish people. Years later, others would romanticize and add gods and a writing system, names and plant artifacts in the ground. This would have been what's known as the ancient history of Scotland. This would be taught at schools. So after Donnelly mishaps, the Scots were forced back to the drawing boards. So now someone will locate or create and plant something to establish Scots as an old place. Let me introduce you to Mr. Fujimura. In 1981, a Japanese archaeologist named Shinichi Fujimura discovered some stones that dated back 40,000 years, making them the oldest ever found in Japan. By 1999, he had visited more than 150 dig sites and found something at all of them, earning the name Divine Hands. For the next 20 years, this guy went around finding artifacts, making his Japanese community very proud. The artifacts were put in museums for them to admire. Japan can now say they have ancient history. They now can claim that they are an ancient people. Fujimura findings set Japan in the running for one of the oldest civilizations dating far back as 700,000 years. He became a celebrity with his findings, creating drinks for enthusiastic customers who traveled to marvel at the 100,000-year-old Pelea site and to get a glimpse at the renowned archaeologist. Students would visit his sites on field trips and be shown how ancient the Japanese are. By this time, people were becoming jealous and suspicious. Some of Fujimura counterparts decided to spy on him, hiding cameras over his dig site. While he was being filmed, he was on tape planting more than 61 pieces of created crap in the ground, crushing the paleo-early man who Fujimura claimed to have found. Fujimura said, "I was tempted by the devil." More than 20 years later, in 2003, the Japanese Archaeological Association expelled him after finally admitting they had a copious amount of fake artifacts he had found. The Tokyo National Museum removed more than 100 artifacts from the museum, having to change everything they were teaching about their Paleolithic period. Publications would have to be made and the ancient Japan history would have to be rewritten. In 2006, Alessio Gil showed some artifacts he found at a dig site said to be from an ancient Roman town. It's conceivable the map used to locate the town was the fake Roman map. Archaeologists marveled, stating the discovery was little of a miraculous one. Gills said he was digging and found a clay pot dating to the 3rd BC with a depiction of the crucifixion of Christ and some hieroglyphs. He alleged the pot possessed some of the Basque words which predated every language by 600 years. So this guy pretty much found a unicorn. He had the temerity to say that this would change the history books. He claimed it had a Roman god named Jupiter written on it, but there was no letter J until the 1600s. A group of white-skinned people known as the Basque. No one knows how or when they got to their location. They were discovered in northern Spain with no alphabet to document their history. Antiquarians with racist motives have been trying to match the base to a created ancient group for decades. Previous scholars have tried to connect the base to the Egyptians, Hittites, Phoenicians, Legions, North and South American Indians. Others have said they were descendants of the lost Atlanteans of Atlantis. So Eliseo decided to add them to Rome's fake history as well. So it was ruled that the findings had been manipulated with a modern racist mindset. Gil and his team of archaeologists were found guilty. The Basque police officer, who was led on the case, told the court this case was one of the greatest falsification relating to artifacts and history on the Roman world. For their insidious deeds on history, Gil was sentenced to 2 years and had to pay €12,500. Certain who helped create the fake findings was ordered to pay the same. Oscar Escribano, a geologist who pleaded guilty and claimed it was all a joke. In this segment we will be discussing the creation and forgery of European history, or what I like to call history without the twist. When exploring classical European history, fictitious people are at its foundation and fake artifacts as the glue used to hold it together. It's said, most findings remain hidden for they are so delicate. When they are really kept obscure, so no one can examine them, to prove their authenticity. Pale-skinned Europeans are attributing the commencement of civilization, medicine and literacy as their creation. These falsities are now under further review. The Bronze Period is mentioned with Plato, Homer, Aristotle, along with Socrates. Homer is a fictional character, alleged to have written some stories titled the Iliad and the Odyssey. Plato was said to have an academy, Socrates was said to have a lyceum and Aristotle walked in parks and taught. Studious scholars claim they never existed, while racist dilettantes acting as historian pundits, asserted them and their stories into history, insisting they physically took place. Subsequently morphing into what we know now as ancient European history, which is all lies. For the fact, Europeans in ancient times did not have a learning institution nor did they have an alphabet. Europeans did not develop in Europe, they developed in Egypt and Northeast Africa after Alexander the Greek made contact with the ancient Egyptians. When these savages entered Africa, they brought no alphabet, no mathematics, no gods, and no history. Like other authors, this so-called history book repeats perverted scholarship as actual history, revealing and trying to explain away questionable doubts, pawned off as folklore and/or myth without further investigation. They candidly admit no one can separate fact from fiction while claiming Greeks had a writing system and lost it, which cannot be substantiated. For the simple fact, in ancient times Europeans did not have a learning institution. This is why their ancient history is hazy with no credible evidence. Most if not all of European ancient history is from Homer, a pseudonym for a person who was created later in time, to try and explain ancient European history, by creating monsters along with battles and cities, that never took place. Herodotus is another created person who scholars cannot agree on if he even existed. Despite that, he somehow is credited with being an ancient historian, telling us about the Persian and Greek wars that never happened. Ancient European history is based on a guy who never existed, a 19th-century archaeologist, which is code for a fake history creator. Named Heinrich Schliemann, he became obsessed with Homer's Iliad stories of Troy's history and was determined to find evidence that it actually had taken place, even if that meant planting and forging findings.
A few moments later,
Schliemann went to a location, started digging and you guessed it, found an artifact, and it was from the ancient Troy era. A gold mask of Agamemnon a king, dating it to the BC. Which means bull crap, this would later be found to be fake. We will conclude this segment with Pompeii, said by Homer in his stories, to be an ancient city that the Europeans occupied, and was populous. Having mathematicians, intellectual debates, of the best minds. The finest humans Zeus has ever made. Scholars rely on Homer stories once again as the only source to establish and give a foundation to ancient European history. When asked where it was, no one knows. Later, a place was formed, and oddly enough, a volcano just so happened to destroy everything in the city. Iliad and Odyssey buffs once again attempt to prove these stories factual by creating artifacts, known as a fresco, which are paintings, drawn on some pots and walls said to be from the Roman era. These were supposed to validate Pompeii. Pompeii forgers have created fake bodies, encased in plaster to corroborate when a volcano erupted, and wiped away all of the history of this awesome place. These are fake created artifacts. I will restate this again. Europeans in ancient times did not have a learning institution to manifest an alphabet. They fought and killed one another for food and trinkets, constantly warring. An alphabet and literacy was the furthest thing from their mind. The European civilization and first Renaissance developed in Egypt, the traditional date being 332 BC, when Alexander made contact with the ancient Egyptians. And yes, I am going to say it, Alexander is another incorporeal created creature, who allegedly came into Egypt after almost defeating the whole world, giving the title of the Great, ruling for only 9 years and dying with no evidence of him, but we will not go down that road. There are countless fake findings of artifacts that just did not add up, yet we still have an ancient history of the European which we can start to see how it started. Not just them. The next segment we will discuss what happened when the savage European came into Egypt, what the ancient Egyptians were doing before the uncivilized Europeans came. How did the Europeans get a god?